Hello, beautiful family. I'm so happy to see y'all here today. I want to thank you for coming and joining us on the No Coincidences podcast. Hello, Kevin and Mary and Lisa. I'm so excited to have y'all here today. We have a very special guest with us. His name is Lon Strickler. How are you doing today, Lon?
I'm doing fine.
I just want to give my family a little bit of a backstory on you. So, just to let everybody know, Lon has been in the paranormal world for a very long time. He's been doing it since 2005 is when he started his blog. And he has been seen on many different shows, radio shows, podcasts. His work is on some places, including History Channel, Syfy, and I do believe the latest one that I saw out there for you, Lon, is on Unsolved Mysteries. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was back in about 2 months ago.
Nice. So, what got you started in the paranormal world?
Well, I was kind of born into it, actually, though it's nothing to do as far as family and generational. I kind of knew very young, back in the '60s, actually, that there was something going on with me, and my first real encounter that I remember was when I was 9 years old. I I lived when I do now again. I live near Gettysburg. I used to spend a lot of time on the battlefield as a kid.
Wow.
And during the summer, I would get on my bike and get on the highway and ride my bike over to the battlefield and spend some afternoons there. Well, one particular day in 19 oh god, what was it? 1967, 68. I I was in the area where what they call the Valley of Death, and it's between Little Round Top, Devil's Den, and the wheat field. Anyway, I was on my bike. I was on the access road, and for whatever reason, all of a sudden, it's like everything opened up. I mean, like a big TV screen opened up in front of me, and I was in the battle. Quite frankly, I was seeing soldiers. I was hearing gunfire, smelling gunpowder. I mean, all my senses were heightened. And that lasted for like 30 seconds and just stopped. And I'm left dumbfounded. You got a 9 year
Right.
old kid and you're wondering what's going on. That was probably the first profound thing to happen to me. And ever since that day, it's continued on all these years.
Wow, that's incredible. And that you got to live right there by the battlefields that our country was founded on. That's amazing. Did you experience actually running into paranormal, like ghosts or anything of that nature while you were hanging out on those battlefields?
I can sense energy. Um, and the way that happens, and it's kind of confusing to some people, but I sense energy and colors. Basically, my mind's eye sees certain colors when energy's around me, and it took some time till I finally realized that. But I would go to certain parts of the battlefield where the energy would be the strongest,
Right.
and it would start to occur, and that's how I sensed that things were going on. Now I have seen apparitions, I have seen manifestations and such ever since, all the time. I still do. And occasionally I do my podcast and people are telling me they see something back here. So, you know, so things do happen. But yeah, I mean, I've been doing that ever since. And then when I got into high school, I actually started doing paranormal investigations. And that was a period of time, that was back in the early '70s when it just wasn't really something people talked about, doing paranormal investigations. People look at you funny when you said that to them, like, you don't know what you're talking about. But
Right.
I actually got it started in that very early. And back then, of course, there was no cell phones or anything. It was all word of mouth. And I had, even in my last couple of years in high school, I was doing investigation. So, so after I did that, I moved down to Baltimore. I lived down there for about 40 years, raised a family. And, during that time, I got involved with a lot of different things. I had a Bigfoot encounter in 1981 in Sykes near Sykesville, Maryland, and I had another encounter with a winged humanoid in 1988 here in Pennsylvania. But then I eventually moved back up here in 2016, and I've been here since.
Oh wow. So you mentioned that you were doing this when it wasn't popular.
Mhm.
What do you think brought the paranormal to become such an enduring part of our pop culture?
Uh, the early media, just like, In Search Of and a few other shows, and of course, back in the '60s, it really started to start coming out, like the Benny and Barty Hill abduction cases, the, Patterson Gimlin film. People were becoming more and more open about investigating the paranormal. And as time went on, and over the past 20 years, you know, of course, paranormal has become mainstream in
Right.
TV and I mean, movies and all, of course, now with the internet, so people have become less and less reluctant about coming forward with cases and their experiences. So,
Exactly.
I've been fortunate enough to, been doing this long enough to where people, and even before I even started the blog, I was taking cases and such and working for other people. But, I accumulated a pretty large amount of cases over those many years. And then I started doing the blog and started actually doing some investigations, formed a team, and it's what we're doing now.
That is so awesome. I'm going to rewind us just for a minute. Sunny from our comments had a question. She said, reading energy and color, isn't that reading auras?
Now it's not. I can see auras on occasion, but my mind's eye, and when you talk about your mind's eye, it's pretty hard to describe that. But basically, I see certain colors that indicate certain energies around me. And in fact, just like for instance, when there is an energy around me of a possible uh, non-corporeal being, I will see pink and kind of a foam green color in my mind's eye. It's weird, but
Wow.
yeah, that I as soon as that as soon as I start seeing that, then I know something's around me,
Right.
and that's when I guess I my body or my mind just starts focusing in on that, and in some occasions I've been able to somewhat communicate, but basically, I just can start picking up on movement, and many times it has manifested for me. So, yeah, and that's how I really got involved with the paranormal because I was using that for cases, and I was using that to help me investigate locations. And I'm also a trained remote viewer. I was trained by an individual who had actually worked for the MI6 British government, and I was trained by them to remote view, and
Wow.
I use that in my cases as well. So yeah, it's kind of an eclectic thing with me, but I use whatever I can use. I mean, I divination crystals and such. I use all of it, and not to the point where it's going to interfere with the case, but just where it would actually help me out.
Right. I had a lady that I worked with who spoke of being able to see things through colors, kind of like what you're talking about. And she would
Hmm.
tell me that when she saw the energies, it was like as the energy shifted, like say the person or the entity went from being happy to sad or something like she would physically see the colors shifting as the vibrations moved along. Is that kind of what you see as well?
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly what it's like. I mean, I guess it depends on the situation and the location. Sometimes it's a little bit different, but especially if I'm not on location. Now, if I'm doing remote view, it's different.
Right.
Remote viewing really isn't a psychic endeavor. It's
Right.
basically using the clues and the visions that you do pick up while you're doing it.
Exactly.
Using the different phases, it can get up to 6, 7 phases at a time doing an actual session. But with me, invariably, it does turn into somewhat of a intuitive endeavor and a psychic endeavor to where as I'm getting further and further along into it, I start picking up more things and I start sensing things and then I start incorporating it into my view.
Right. And I love that you mentioned remote viewing right now. We all know the name of my show is No Coincidences. And I actually just signed up for a remote viewing class a couple days ago. I'm so excited to do it because everything that I personally do is self trained,
Right.
right? I've been intuitive most of my life or actually all of my life. I just didn't realize it when I was younger, right? But now that I'm like really getting into the paranormal world and getting to know amazing people like yourself, I'm like so intrigued by all of these classes and these masters that are out here that can teach us things. So when I signed up for this remote viewing class, I'm like, okay, I'm going to learn how to like see things in my mind's eye that I'm not already seeing. I hope I'm hoping to be able to learn to visualize it better. What has it been like for you going on your journey of learning remote viewing?
Well, it's kind of expanding my perspective of what I'm doing. Um, I seem to be able to visualize um, either the energy or whatever I'm focusing in on more clearly now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I have a lot of people who ask me about remote viewing, and look, I've tried to train people. I'm just not patient enough to do it. But there's a lot of people who do know how to train properly, particularly if they're using coordinated remote viewing or scientific remote viewing where you go by the phases.
Right. That's what
Um,
the one is doing that I just signed up for is
well,
doing some
that's
coordinate.
the place to start at, and when people ask me the best way to do it, I say first of all, find someone you're going to be able to get trained by, and then
Yeah.
have them explain all the phases to you. Do some test cases, do some using a monitor, and then using the actual remote viewers. If you're just
Mm-hmm.
doing it singly, or if you're using it as a team in different locations and coming together at the end. Um, then after doing that, then normally I suggest to do some self training after that. It becomes much easier to do.
Right.
So yeah, but what you're going to do is the way to start out.
Oh well, thank you for that because I was like looking, and I'm like, oh, let me please find the right one. And I see that one of my commenters here was saying that the Monroe Institute might be a place for me to look into as well. So I will have to definitely check that
Yeah,
out.
Monroe Institute is kind of they're the SRI originators, and they a lot of the better known remote viewers you're out beyond military and government service uh, have gone through Monroe and a few other ones actually. But
Wow.
some of the top remote viewers originally worked for either MI6 or worked for uh, the CIA or government and such. So and
Right.
there are a few of them out there. Not many of them around anymore, but there's a few of those around there.
um, Throughout all of your experiences and encounters, has there been any one specific that really stuck out to you? And if so, can you tell us about it?
Wow, I've done so many cases. You know, at this point it kind of runs together. I well, the more dramatic cases have usually been through remote viewing, and where I've experienced psychic attacks as a result. And that's one thing you've got to be cognizant of. Uh, protecting yourself before you get into that. I mean, and anyone who does any type of paranormal investigation, from amateur to professional, or someone who has been doing it for such a long time, you do need to learn to protect yourself, either white light,
Right.
golden light, or divination, or some type of uh, some type of you know prayer. Some people use prayer. Some people use other types of things as well. But you need to use something. I usually use a white or golden light to extend out beyond my auras, and that's how I'm usually protecting myself.
Yeah, I know I personally I like to use crystals, and I do prayer before I do anything. And I mean, like I said just a little bit ago, I've already been doing this, and it's self-taught. I love that when we have our awakenings, that there's so many things that's already in our mind that we're like, oh yeah, we know how to do this. But there's only so far that self-taught can get us, right? We need to be
Right.
able to go to experts and be able to find more. Um, I know you said that you've always known.
Yeah.
Um, was there a specific point where in life you were like, okay, I've had my awakening and I'm seeing these things. This is what I want to do with it for my career for the rest of my life.
No, I had no intentions of making it a career. It's one of those things where I had a regular. I was an engineer, and I was actually a union. I worked for the United Steelworkers as a district representative for the international. So I did contract negotiations and such for years. But that was my regular job. But this was something that I would incorporate after I did my work. I mean, it was kind of a I wasn't doing it for profit or anything, and I really don't do it for profit. Basically, it's now that I'm retired, it's just something I do, and I enjoy doing. If I did enjoy doing, I wouldn't do it. But I
Right.
like helping people, and in particular, when there's cases of some type of oppression or some type of attachment or something with an individual, especially if there's kids. I do a lot of that, and I do a lot of work. I have done a lot of work with kids who have been involved with attachments and poltergeist cases and such for years. And many of these kids grew up to be pretty good psychics as well. So that's just part of what I do, and I've been doing that now for many years.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned kids because my 4 year old, I'm assuming it's because of the way that I am raising her to be so open minded and accepting. She is so intuitive. I mean, just like this last weekend, she was sitting there with me and she said, Mommy, don't we all have three eyes? There's one here and one here and one there, right? And I was like, I've never talked to you about this. It's amazing that you know this. And with her going in between two homes, the situations are very different within the homes. At the other house, they're atheist, and here we're very spiritual. So it's interesting to see the balance that even a 4 year old can learn to have within those two areas. Um, I love that you're saying that the children grow up to be able to know those psychic abilities so well because that's what I'm really hoping for my daughter.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, it doesn't happen all the time, but many times I'll get called into a case, a really bad haunting or poltergeist situation, or even with attachments. And many times the client is what I call a beacon. They've got abilities, and they're these energies and these even malevolent or benevolent will come to them. Will try to be around them. And many times a younger child will see this, and since their minds are uncorrupted, they can pick up on a lot of different things. And many times I have talked to the parents uh, who tell me, "Well, my child sees this and this and this, and tells me this," and of course, I get if I get their permission to go ahead and help the child as well
Hmm.
individually, then I will do that. It's it's not a prerequisite of what I do, but it's just something that many times comes up. And
Right.
yeah, so that's just another aspect of what I do, and what results of it.
So I know that you do a lot of research. A lot of your research has been shown over a multitude of places. What is the most convincing piece of evidence that you have ever come across?
Hmm.
You're like, there's so many.
Yeah, that there is so much. My personal encounters are probably the the most convincing. I mean, like I said, I had a Bigfoot encounter in 1981, and I had a winged humanoid encounter in 1988, which was kind of unusual because my team and I have been involved with the Chicago Mothman phenomenon now since 2011,
Hmm.
and the being that myself and two other people witnessed in 1988 is very similar to what people are seeing out in Chicago. Now, I don't know if that was something that was that was told to me or given to me, that maybe it may be something that I'll be involved with later down the road. It's hard to tell. But
Right.
this whole winged humanoid phenomena, including the Point Pleasant incidents back in 66 and 67. And I knew a lot about that because I have done a lot of investigations down in Point Pleasant and other Mothman or other winged humanoid investigation before I even got involved with the Chicago case. And yeah, it just seems that that was kind of my calling, I guess. But it just seemed to work out. And yeah, for whatever reason, we started getting these reports and have been involved with it ever since and continue to be so.
That's awesome. How credible do you find the physical evidence that people bring up, whether it be footprints, hair samples, uh, videos? I mean, there's obviously all sorts of evidence that people bring. How credible do you find most of it?
Not a lot of it. Most of it is, I guess, a matter of perspective or perception.
Right.
People see a footprint, they think, well, it looks human, but it's much bigger. It's got to be a Bigfoot. Well, that's not necessarily true. There's hair samples, unless you can do something as far as DNA or anything like that. And there have been tests and such done on various physical samples, but to this point, there's been no real delineation as to what people are actually encountering or what a Bigfoot actually is. All I know is I saw something that was very, very much what people describe. And in fact, when it did occur, I wasn't even involved with cryptids and such. I
Right.
didn't even know what I was looking at, and but I got curious after the encounter, and then started to take cryptids as part of what I do,
Right.
and I'd say that's 90% of what I do now.
One of our viewers, Anna, asked, "What is a humanoid?"
Well, a humanoid is basically something that looks human in body structure, but it's different for whatever reason. Some say it could be an interdimensional being, a multidimensional being, ultra terrestrial being, alien, extraterrestrial. Um, as far as what I've been involved with myself with the winged humanoids, they're humanoid-like creatures that have arms, legs, and various aspects of what humans have,
Right.
but they're winged and they do have supernatural abilities. Um, Many times they have the very forward projecting red eyes. That's something that's been seen many times, but there
You
are other
actually
things as well.
experienced that, didn't
I
you?
I did experience that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, and we really don't know what we're dealing with, though. I think at this point now, we can safely assume that they're not indigenous beings. They're not earthbound beings. That they're something that's possibly interdimensional, but possibly comes from a linear dimension of some type, and it shows up in our world or our Earth plane for whatever reason. We just haven't been able to distinguish why that happens.
Right.
The cases that we've been doing in and around the Chicago area, right now we're at about 170 some odd cases that we feel are legitimate. Uh,
Right.
so, yeah, there's something definitely going on. And it's not just happening there, it's happening in other places as well. But
Exactly.
yeah, it's so that's kind of what we focus on at this point. And we'll focus on that until something else comes around. But I look into a lot of different things, especially
Of
here in
course.
Pennsylvania.
Right. What do you think of the numerous sightings and reportings of paranormal that's coming up across the world? Do you think that they've always been this present, or do you think that it's just because now we have more things like the media, social media, people have cell phones, that it's just more present to us now?
Well, it's become more mainstream. Of course, with the internet and media and picking up on it and producing all these TV shows and a lot of people had been doing blogs and they do other things as well. YouTube has got videos everywhere.
Right.
Sure, there's a lot of room for fakery and but it's become more mainstream. People are less reluctant to come forward and talk about it, as opposed to what it used to be when I was younger. I mean, it was like pulling teeth. It was just very difficult to get a story out of someone. Um,
Right.
and also another thing that tends to happen sometimes is where people will report something to you, and for whatever reason, they feel like they want to satisfy your curiosity and try to embellish on it. And of course, I don't appreciate that because I'd rather have the actual story, what happened to them, what
Right.
they think they saw or did see, and then go from there. So
Yeah, but
you got to be able to separate the wheat from the chaff, I would say. And
right.
it's just one of those things. It's not that we actually buy into everything that people tell us, but that's why we do the investigations.
Exactly. And I completely agree with you on that. That, these things are such amazing, like these sightings and these stories that people have, they're such amazing stories. We don't really need to embellish it. It's already fantastic that we're getting to have it. Um, we had a couple of commenters asking some questions. So, first, Lori asked scientific cross validation long term is important, but how else might others validate
I guess the biggest thing about this is to have experience.
Right.
You've got to fall back on your experience and all the people you've corresponded with or you've talked to or investigated. Um, and I get asked that a lot. I mean, how to conduct an investigation, and when somebody tells you something, how do you know they're telling you the truth or not? Being an intuitive, many times I can pick up on certain things that do look a little fishy, or they're trying
That
to pull the
part.
wool over my eyes. It does happen, but I do try to be as open minded as possible until it gets to the point where I realize they're doing you know they're not doing me
Right.
any favors. But if somebody has an encounter, that my the way I look at it is when they contact me, they're making me part of their encounter or their
Exactly.
incident, and they're contacting me out of confidence. And I don't disclose people's names, locations unless they allow me to. Um,
Right.
and but I will go deep into it with them, and I ask them to do certain things as far as being honest with me, and if I am involved with the case, I do require them to have me as the sole investigator or my team as the sole investigator. After that, they can do what they want to do, but while
Right.
while I'm involved with it, I don't want anything contaminating what I'm doing.
Exactly. And I'm going to go to this next question that we have here from Mary, but I want to say that actually, I might be able to answer it a little bit for her. So I know personally, when people tell me stories or incidences that they've been through, with my personal psychic abilities, I get their visions, right? I actually see what they're seeing. And so that helps me to validate if they're actually telling me truth or not. And I think that kind of goes into Mary's asking remote viewing. Could you explain a little more when you actually go to remote view? Like, is it an out of body experience or what exactly is it? She's wanting to know more about that.
I guess out of body experience would probably be the closest description that you could, or comparison you could use it to. Um, and you'll learn when you start training. Uh, Many times you go through a process of using affirmations and such before you
Hmm.
start doing it. You will use ideograms, or or use some type of coordinate that's used by the monitor to try to get the viewer on track as to what they're trying to get you to look into. But there's other physical aspects of it as well when you're actually doing the RV. Um, but I would say out of body is probably it's an interesting comparison because many times, and I do as well, if I'm on the phone with somebody or I'm talking to somebody, I'm starting to get visions right away. There'll be
Right,
times I'm on the phone and somebody will be describing to me, and I had to interrupt them and say, "Look, did this happen, or is this and this going on right now?" Because I'm picking up on it, and many
right,
times I am picking up the correct thing, or the correct uh, series of events. So, but as far as remote viewing goes, it takes a while to pick up, but you start getting to a point where it's just very smooth as you go on. Quite frankly, I actually learned while the person who I was doing the training with was in Great Britain, and of course, I was here in the United States, so we were doing it through Skype, and we did it every day for about 2 to 3 hours a day, if not more, unless we did an actual case, and it was many hours. But I did that for almost a year.
right. That's
So it takes a
amazing.
lot of work, but you know, it's something you pick up on, you don't forget,
Right.
and quite frankly, when you're doing cases, it does make it a lot easier because your perception is much better.
Yeah. I know a lot of my viewers know I'm prior military, and I'm not gonna lie, I've done a little bit of remote viewing around the installations and stuff like that, and you're like,
Hmm.
whoa, it's amazing what they have around there. Like right now, I personally live next to they call it Fort Cavazos now. It used to be Fort Hood, and it's the biggest military installation in the
Or
United
you're out in
States.
Texas.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
I had
it's
a buddy who was stationed there, so I know.
yeah, but when you remote view, like I actually went remote viewing with a friend one day, and I was like, "Yeah, let's look over here." And apparently, they ended up on the other side of the base, and we were not looking at the same thing. And he was like, "What am I looking at?" And I was like, "I don't know. You're not looking at what I'm looking at." So that's one of those things where you have to make sure you know your exact coordinates of where you're going, so you're not doing two different things.
You'll be surprised how many things you pick up on, um,
Yeah,
especially when you're doing a particular case. You're done with the phases, and then you kind of decompress and start to talk about what you're getting involved with. And having psychic ability or having intuitive ability really helps in that respect because then you can start looking at all the different possibilities as to what had gone on or what you're looking at. It doesn't, being intuitive doesn't really give you the answers, but it gives you more clues and then it gives you more to look into.
exactly. I am going to rewind a little bit again because Anna had a question while we were talking about humanoids. She said they aren't angels.
I'm a strong believer in angels. Let's put
Me
it that.
too.
I'm not I'm not religious. I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious.
Same.
Uh, I was raised as a Lutheran and evangelical Lutheran. I was, but that all went to the wayside when I grew up, and
Right.
that really hasn't helped me. Though I'll be honest with you, I have used certain aspects of the Catholic rites in cases. Um, I have been involved with people who are actual exorcists, even Vatican trained exorcists. I have seen exorcisms. I've been invited, though I haven't really participated. I've been invited to witness it.
Wow.
I do believe, though I don't necessarily buy into the demon thing. A lot of times people talk about demons like, you know, it that you hear demons this, demons that everywhere, and it's not necessarily, look, evil's evil.
Yeah.
Malevolency is evil, and it's all around us. And but as far as angels go, I don't believe angels are they're not spirits. They are something entirely different. Are they extraterrestrial? I think they're probably closer to that than they are anything else.
Right.
Um, I have talked to remote viewers, one in particular who has communicated with angels, and she has told me that they are extraterrestrial, and she has communicated with other extraterrestrial beings as well as part of her work, and she's written several books about it. So, but I haven't necessarily gone that far, but I do have guardian angels. I do believe in angels. I do believe in that they are uh some they are an energy, or they are a being, but they're they come here to help us and to make things easier for us.
Mhm.
You know, I've had a lot of people ask me about well, how do you communicate with an angel, or how do you use angels? And the only thing I could really tell them is, you tell the angel what you want. Um, they're here to help you.
Right.
I've been very fortunate. I think my life has been steered in certain directions because of angels, quite
Mhm.
frankly.
Right.
My wife, who's deceased, was very into angels. Uh, I probably and I, you know, when I married her, I didn't know anything about it. I mean, her interest in it. It's something we eventually learned together, and but she was always very spiritual, and
Yeah.
uh, you know, I got more of an insight about it, and as time went on, it deepened, and it's just another aspect of what I use in my cases, and in my personal life.
Right. I will say that my personal views on it is that we have humans, we have star seeds, we have the angelic realm, and then of course we have source. Um, and that's not to say that one entity is better than the other. It's just saying that we've come from different places and we have different purposes, right? You know, star seeds are put here in order to help humans be able to understand the ultimate meaning of what source wants from them.
Hmm.
The angelic realm, as you said, they're the protectors. And I know I personally believe that angels can be in human form. I don't think it happens very often, but I do believe that angels can take human form to come to earth to try to give us the divination that we're supposed to have in this life.
And I have received a lot of reports and a lot of cases where people have believed that they've encountered an angel. The perception of a human who does angelic things, or has advice for them, or kind of steers them in a certain direction, or saves them, or tries to talk them out of doing such things. Many
Right,
times I've talked to people who thought about committing suicide and such, and uh, they say someone walks into their life and basically steers them in another direction.
Right.
And after a while, they start to realize, well, maybe that was an angel. And I get a lot of those come my way. If you ever go to my blog and search angel in there, you're going to find it.
Yeah,
There's a
I definitely will.
it happens a lot, and I think I may have had that happen, maybe to a lesser degree, but I think it has been something very important in my life, though I can't really put a finger on exactly when and where. But
Mhm.
I think because I'm more open to it than most people would be, that it does come into me, and you get that inner voice that just tells you sometimes, well, maybe you need to consider something else, or So I usually if I'm pondering something, and the first thing that comes to my mind is usually what I end up doing.
Right. Yeah. I look, I'm going to tell you my guides, they have very strong voices and opinions. I think I get a little bit of that from them and a little bit of it from my mama, but I'm going to tell you when they want something to happen, they do not stop hounding me. So I get that completely. I
Yep, it does
have
happen.
Mary is going back and asking another question about the humanoid. She said, "How did you know it was a humanoid, if you don't mind explaining?"
Well, in particular, the one I saw, it had arms, legs. It looked human body form.
Right?
Um, quite frankly, and I think humans in general are a universal species. In other words, I just don't think it's confined to Earth. I think humans are in some form or humanoid form. When people talk to you about alien beings or extraterrestrial beings, I did a book about alien disclosure. I did about abductions and
I
such.
was reading
I,
that one, yeah.
and yeah, so you know what I'm talking about there. I believe I believe that these beings that people describe as aliens or extraterrestrials or even humanoids may actually be evolved humans who have some abilities, even though it's maybe a later technology to come back into our time our time period for whatever reason. Are they coming back to either save something or coming back to change things? I think that does happen. I personally believe we've been pulled out of the fire many times.
Right. I do too. I'm right there with you. um, what is your response to people when they try to dismiss paranormal entities that we're speaking of right now, when they try to say that it's a myth or a hoax?
I simply tell them it's within their uh, uh, prerogative to believe what they want to believe. It used to be a time when I would argue with people about that. Now, of course, I'll go into a show, a round table or something, and we'll have skeptics in there, and then I got to open up a little bit more. But quite frankly, I don't discount anybody's views on anything. They're entitled to it, and I'm not one to tell them what they should and shouldn't be doing, or should and shouldn't be leaving. And yeah, so uh, I'm not normally confrontational about that.
Right.
I know what I've encountered. I know what I've experienced. I'm an experiencer as well. I've been through a lot of different things over time. I've explained a lot of it in my books, and that basically, if they want to believe it, they can. If not, well, there you go.
Right. Um, do you believe that the scientific community should take more consideration and take the research more seriously into paranormal phenomena?
I think to a certain extent they already have been. Um, just look at the Bigfoot phenomena or cryptid phenomena in general, because I do think most cryptids even though there may be some indigenous beings that are actually on our earth plane, I think for the most part these are interdimensional beings. But
Right.
I also believe that as time has gone on and people are more and more involved in cryptid phenomena, that many of them, even hardcore investigators who I've been involved with for decades, are starting
Mhm.
to come around to the fact that there's something that's just unexplained about this. We're not finding bodies. We're not finding evidence like we should be. Uh, we don't have a live being. We don't
Right.
even have a dead being. We don't have anything like that. And there's something beyond our abilities at this point to explain what they are. I think a lot of scientists, even though they're trained to be skeptics, basically, I think some of them are more open minded to it as time has gone on. They don't completely discount it out of hand.
Right.
But I think as time goes on, look, I also believe as quantum computing may be an answer to a lot of this eventually, because as you know, quantum computing is becoming more and more commercial now. It's still
Mhm.
very expensive, but it's going to get to the point where it's become a consumer product, and people are going to be getting more and more involved with it. I
Right.
think when that happens, I think more of the unexplained is going to be explained.
Exactly. I completely agree with you. And I have one last question for you, and then I'm going to let you go about your day. What would it mean to you personally if all of the paranormal phenomena that we research was definitively proven to exist or even disexist?
Um, if let's put it this way, if the majority of people believe it's true, more
Hmm.
and more people believe it's true. If we get some type of scientific proof that it's true, then fine. I'll just go on to another level of the paranormal. Cryptids are not a moot point. We may prove some cryptids are out there,
Yeah.
but there's always something else to pop its ugly head up and give us the opportunity to investigate it.
Do you have any last words that you would like to give to our audience today or anything that you'd like to address?
The only thing I can say is, you know, when you hear about something, or even if you experience something, be very open minded about it. Um, you know, sure, it may be something sudden, it may scare you, but if you become interested and curious about what you've investigated, I mean, what you've experienced, and that has happened to me. I mean, I have gone further into it. Now, a lot of people aren't going to have the time to do that, or even have the inclination to do that.
Right.
But I would say just to be more open minded about our world, because there's a lot of things we just don't understand. And I think there's a lot of things that we will eventually understand down the road.
Yes. I completely agree with you. Like, I mean, I know there's so many things that we touched on today, but us being in the paranormal community that we are in, there's a lot of people that believe that they travel through teleportation or they do all these different things and that's why we can't find them and they're so elusive. I personally can't wait for the day that we can 100% prove that they are real and prove that science and spirituality should come together to be able to make these things happen. Um, so I'm 100% on board with what you said. And my audience is saying that they love you so much. You're so knowledgeable. Thank you so much for joining us. How can they find you if they want to come get more knowledge from you?
Well, my blog is at phantomsandmonsters.com. Um, I do have a team, the Phantoms and Monsters 14 research team. Look, if you go onto Google and type in Phantoms and Monsters or Lon Strickler, it's going to come up.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, there's a lot of different things I'm involved with, and as time goes on, hopefully there'll be more and more. But you know, my time's limited, so you know,
Right.
I do what I can do, but I try to make my research, my investigations, our team's investigations as accessible as possible to the public. I don't charge. And look, I will disclose. People are generous enough to come forward and help support me, and I appreciate that completely. But it's nothing. It's not a prerequisite to what I do.
Right.
I just enjoy helping people, and actually, when you do a case and the results are life changing, it's probably one of the best experiences and feelings that you can have.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I definitely appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. Thank you for allowing my audience to be part of your energy today. And I look forward to maybe getting to do this again soon.
No problem.
With
Just let me
all of
know.
that with all of that said, love and light to our beautiful family and have a wonderful evening.